and let me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I am worn through the sun. Oh, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, oh precious Lord, and lead me home. When my way draws near, oh precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry. Let's not fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. Thank you so very much. It's so wonderful for you guys to be here joining us. We are the DC6 Singers. We are out of Los Angeles, California, and we're so happy to be here in the lovely town of Riverside. Hello, everybody. That first piece, Precious Lord, is actually connected to Bayard Rustin. That was Martin Luther King's all-time favorite hymn. And it's something that we just really love to bring to you tonight. So the next song that we have for you is, as we're going through tonight, please feel free. If you know the song, sing along. If you feel so inclined, clap along with us, right? So please enjoy the show. We've got a couple more things for you. And next up, we're going to sing Whole World. He's got the whole world. I know you know this one, so. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
My hands were made to worship you. My heart, my key is beat for you. Oh, now, so true, I surrender to you. My life, I give. My love, I give. My all. Your touch, your kiss, your grace to me is deeper than my soul can see. My purpose is changed when I call out your name. My life, I give. My love, I give.
tradition. It's Balm in Gilead. I hope you enjoy it.
There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul.
Sometimes I get discouraged and I feel my works in vain, but then I feel the Spirit revive my soul again. Oh, there is a balm in Gilead. Don't ever feel discouraged, 'cause Jesus is your friend. And if you ask for knowledge, He will never fail to lend. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Oh, there is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. There is a
Total praise is where it's at. We have one more song for you guys. And this one we want to bring tonight because in thinking about Bayard Rustin and Martin Luther King and that entire civil rights movement, the song that we're going to sing for you is Giants, you know? And the lyrics are, giants, they die, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And that entire community were fighting giants of our civilization, right? We were fighting the giants of racism, fighting giants of oppression, giants of poverty, and these are still the giants that we continue to fight today. So we just wanted to leave you guys with that before we get into our musical celebration of Mr. Rustin. So thank you so much. Again, we're the DC6 Singers, and we got one more song for you. It's been lovely to have you tonight.
Giants do die, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Giants, they die. Just walk around your Jericho wall. Come in your name and stand on your word. What's loosed in the heavens will be loosed on earth. Now come in your name and stand on your word. What's loosed in the heavens will be loosed on earth. Let God arise, giants die. Giants do die. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Giants, they die. Just walk around your Jericho wall. Come in your name, stand on your word. What's loosed in the heavens will be loosed on earth. Now come in your name, stand on your word. What's loosed in the heavens will be loosed on earth. Let God arise, giants die. Your praise will bring down strongholds. When you praise, you will see miracles. Just praise when things seem impossible. And the King of Glory will show His glory. Let God arise, giants die. Giants do die. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Giants, they die. Just walk around your Jericho wall. Come in your name and stand on your word. What's loose in the heavens will be loosed on earth. Now come in your name and stand on your word. What's loose in the heavens will be loosed on earth. Let God arise, giants die.
Six singers, weren't they amazing? I'll be very brief. My name is Sandy Haller, and I'm the president of the South Coast Chorale, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for coming out tonight. Almost exactly 2 years ago, the South Coast Chorale premiered Bayard Rustin, the Man Behind the Dream, for audiences in Long Beach, along with a couple of local Long Beach choirs. The reception was so overwhelmingly positive, we were asked to perform it again several times. But here we are 2 years later, for the first time, getting the chance to perform it again, here for you all, in this beautiful, historic Fox Theater in Riverside. Yes. So I wanted to take just a moment to thank the theater and the community of Riverside for welcoming us with such open arms and giving us 3 of your amazing local choirs to join us tonight. So we have over 100 singers on stage. So the one thing you'll take, sorry, I had to get the reading glasses on. One thing you'll take away from tonight is what everybody said, what we all said, which is how do we not know about this man and his story, because he's amazing. You'll take it with you as you leave the theater, we hope. We're getting one more chance to perform this piece come this summer at one of the world's or North America's largest chorale festivals over the 4th of July weekend in Minneapolis. The composers will be there. We're performing it with the other 5 commissioning choruses. So we're thrilled tonight to be sharing it again with you, and I hope you find it as rewarding as we did. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you enjoy Bayard Rustin, the man behind the dream.
I now bring to you the executive director of the March on Washington, the man who organized this whole thing, Mr. Bayard Rustin.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first demand is that we have effective civil rights legislation, no compromise, no filibuster, and that it includes public accommodation, decent housing, integrated education, FAPC, and the right to vote. What do you say?
Respect for life, sharing his love.
January 20th, 2020, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. When Congress passed the King Holiday Bill into law in 1983, Coretta Scott King informed America,
"This is not a black holiday. It is a people's holiday. It is our holiday, and we have all come together to celebrate in the living legacy of sacrifice, courage, and humanity that was Dr. King's enduring song, a song that we all know so well. We shall overcome."
Now you may think that Dr. King's song was a solo song. Selma and marching, a fatal shot on an April day in Memphis. I have a dream. I have a dream.
Or perhaps you see Dr. King's song as a kind of barbershop quartet of social justice, featuring singers like A. Philip Randolph, Ralph J. Abernathy, John Lewis, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I have a dream. I have a dream.
But what do you know about Bayard Rustin?
Here in a landscape of iPhone dreamers, Wikipedia, and difficult to grasp human lessons that keep marching their way around again and again, what do you know about the man behind the dream?
Bayard Rustin was born to change the world. Now, I don't mean to be hyperbolic. I'm just coming to you with the truth. Rustin was born in the year of our Lord, 1912. William Howard Taft was president. Memphis Blues was playing the rage on the Victrola. The Titanic sank. Fenway Park opened in Boston.
And 62 African Americans were lynched. It was a different America, people, a different world. And Bayard Rustin was born, a black boy in a world that didn't want to look him in the eye.
Cheek, Bayard, black boy, don't you dare to leave.
Bayard was born with the eyes of a dreamer. He had one foot planted firmly in the separate but equal present, but he was standing on tiptoe, reaching into a future where no boy or nobody would have to wither of spirit and mind under the oppressive fist of ignorance and hate.
Bayard Rustin was raised by his grandmother, Julia, a devout Quaker. She was a free-born African-American woman, and she didn't take nothing from nobody. She was what kids today would call a bad mother. Shut your mouth. I'm talking about Julia. Well, we can dig it. She was a warrior for peace and justice.
As a Quaker, Julia Rustin was a beacon in the small black community of Westchester, Pennsylvania.
The Rustin dining room walls rang with the voices and stories of visiting heroic leaders such as W.E.B. Du Bois,
So's the black folk,
Mary McLeod Bethune,
Bethune-Cookman College.
and the poet and activist James Weldon Johnson.
Lift every voice and sing.
Their voices fueled Bayard's dream. Please join us in singing the Negro National Anthem. Julia impressed upon Bayard the strength and courage of presence. She helped him to see, even through adversity and conflict, the power of remaining calm.
One just doesn't lose one's temper. Grandmother Julia taught him that a peaceful presence was a more powerful weapon against hate than an entire army of cannons and guns.
Bayard learned to treat all people with respect, to hear every side of a controversy, and to put oneself at the service of others in the name of love.
Beautiful boy, sing your beautiful song, always looking ahead with your back so long, with an open heart and a spirit strong. What can break you when you're where you belong?
Only love nourish your
of truth, your song. Nothing can break
It was Grandmother Julia who raised Bayard with the fundamental understanding that we all belong to a single human family and that all members of this human family are equal.
She taught Bayard, through the Quakers and through her own living actions, that even though the hate and cruelty of racism would seek to break and brutalize his humanity with fists and nooses against his body and his mind, it would do him no good to go about meeting violence with violence.
Blessed are the ones of peace, whose hearts and hopes are one, whose heart desires to serve and please through all their actions run. God's goodness stands unchanged from day to day, undropped by burden at His feet, and bear a song away.
But Quakers were not timid people. No, they were peaceful fighters, stalwart humans who put their bodies to use in the fight against hate and brutality.
Quakers were important links in the Underground Railroad, and they lived their faith through action.
So even though young Bayard had a way with words and won all of his high school oratory awards, he was never just talk. Bayard lived his faith. It was in his hands and in his feet and in his heart. It was Bayard's indefatigable faith that we are one human family that fueled one of his first protests as a high school athlete.
At an away football game, the hotel refused to let the black players sleep or eat in the same rooms as the rest of the team. A natural and courageous leader, offensive tackle, and MVP, Bayard led a group of players in protest, refusing to compete in the championship game, and the hotel relented.
It was also at this young age that Bayard expressed to his grandmother his interest and attraction to other young men.
Now, homosexuality at the turn of the 20th century was a crime. In some states, a capital offense punishable by imprisonment or corporal punishment. We've come a long way, friends. Which makes Julia Rustin a woman ahead of her time. Because when Bayard Rustin did what we have come to call coming out, his grandmother only remarked,
I suppose that's what you need to do. Now, Julia understood that as a young black man, Bayard would have to fight to be the kind of free that he dreamed of. He need not add the crippling internal battle of shame to impede his progress. So, Julia just went on raising Bayard in the truth that his love is the same as all love.
My love won't hide, it's never tucked away.
sing as to gain. Some say I fought, that I put on airs. I just brush them off with my own special flair. My love won't hide, gaze into my eyes. Try not to confuse my truth with your lies. Living my life in the light, sex and romance get blurred. Passion that explodes, cuts the love dream deeper. My love won't hide, locked up in a cage. Confined from all movement, hide at center stage. Arms extended, legs intertwined, swirling upturn to the left and the right. In close embrace as we're holding on tight, out of the shadows, into my side. Some others dance in the dark, he's the power of God. Oh, my love, my truth, I say no. Is
And so, armed with the beliefs and the acceptance of his loving home and family, Bayard set out as a young man to change the world.
He became an angelic troublemaker, a man of peaceful and forceful action.
Bayard moved from Westchester, Pennsylvania to New York City. His political development took him through pacifism,
Communism,
socialism,
and into the civil rights movement. He traveled over 10,000 miles through 20 states, bringing the message of love, justice, and equality
to communities and families struggling with the real, everyday pain of poverty and racism. From not being able to put a can of beans on the table to the grief and trauma of racism.
Cross burnings, church bombings, and lynchings.
To the everyday ugliness of being made to hang your head low as you pass a white man on the street.
And Bayard didn't hang his head low for anyone because he knew who he was. He was Julia's grandson.
Proud descendant of slaves.
Child of a mighty and loving God.
He knew no reason to live in the shadows.
Not for being a black man.
Or for being a gay man. Bayard recognized racism and homophobia both as forces of hate, led by ignorance, lies, and fear. He knew that he could not both love God and hate himself for being a black gay man. So he didn't.
He walked tall, and he stood proud. Bayard understood that getting black folks to internalize the hate-filled messages of racism was part of the work of the racist lie to divide communities and eventually the South. He said,
"You can't have someone telling you every day that you are nothing and not start to believe it."
But Bayard told them no. No, you are not ugly. No,
you are not stupid.
No, you are not powerless. He began to give form to his genius strategies of organizing, saying,
Our power is in our ability to make things unworkable. The only weapon we have is our bodies, and we need to tuck them in places so wheels don't turn.
If the seats on the bus can't hold your mother, be a stick in the wheel. And if the seats on the bus can't be used by your father, be a stick in the wheel. And if the seats on the bus aren't meant for all of us, go on and be a stick in the wheel. Hear what I'm saying?
The lathe in the factory can't be used by my auntie, I'll be a stick in the wheel. And if the lathe in the factory can't be turned by my uncle, I'll be a stick in the wheel. If the factory in town gonna turn us all down, well, I'll be a stick in the wheel. Oh, brother, stand by singing, stand by singing. Oh, my sister, lift yourself right to the ground. Oh, brother, walking up the Capitol Hill. Oh, my sister, make that place stand still. It's a big concern. You don't have to say a word, we just got to shut it all down. If the sticks hit the drums, they're beating out a rhythm, beating out a marching sound. If the sticks hit the drums, they're telling all the children how we will strength can be found. Let me explain it to you. If the sticks hit the drums, they're beating out a rhythm, beating out a marching sound. If the sticks hit the drums, they're telling all the children how it was and can be found. 'Cause we won't be ignored if we have to on the board and stop the wheels from turning round. Shut it down!
In 1947, Bayard organized the first freedom rides protesting racial segregation in the South. A full 8 years before Rosa Parks made headlines, Bayard was arrested for sitting in the whites-only section of a bus and was sentenced to work on a chain gang.
I got a rainbow tied all around my shoulder. I got a rainbow tied all around my shoulder. I'm going home. Lord, I'm going home. Everywhere this morning, everywhere where I look this morning, looks like rain, Lord, my Lord need no rain, Lord. Every mail day I get a letter.
In 1944, After refusing to participate in World War II, Bayard spent 28 months in prison as a conscientious objector. His lover wrote him letters in code as a woman so they would not be intercepted by prison officials.
I can't read that. Read that letters of crying. I can't read that. Read that letters of crying. My tears run down. Lord, my tears run down. Just you wait
Even incarcerated and on the chain gang, Bayard moved for justice and began organizing within the prison, documenting the torturous punishments served by the chain gang guards.
I'm gonna fight this fight.
On Bayard's release, he drafted a 5-part series for the New York Post titled 22 Days on the Chain Gang, describing the brutal details of his imprisonment.
These words, combined with Rustin's articulate protests, led to the abolition of the chain gang in North Carolina.
Peaceful movements of protest were changing lives worldwide.
Moved by the life and work of Mahatma Gandhi, Bayard traveled to India to study the work of a global pacifist community. Even in India, he refused to hide his sexuality and loved the jewelry and dress of the people of India.
Profoundly touched by Gandhi's teachings, Bayard wove the path of nonviolent resistance into his strategy for social change. It was this work that led him to meet with the young leader, Martin Luther King Jr.
King was born in 1929. Bayard was 17 years his elder, and their friendship formed a powerful bond, founded in the belief that freedom is not given, it is won.
These two men, dreamers and fighters alike, found their individual strengths complemented. Rustin taught King the principles of nonviolent direct action and worked to bring King to national prominence.
Together, they brought a fierce urgency and momentum to a movement that had been rising and pressing.
Aching against the walls of Jim Crow.
To a place of thunder and collective action that could not and would not be denied.
Any place
On January 6, 1959, Mildred Loving and Richard Perry Loving were sentenced to 1 year in prison for the felony crime of marriage between people classified as white and people classified as colored.
It was a crime for a white man to marry a black woman, but it was not a crime for that same white man to hang and lynch that black woman's brother.
In January of 1953, California police arrested and prosecuted Bayard Rustin for sodomy, or a crime against the order of nature.
A charge which Rustin denied.
He was arrested. The arrest was not only a threat to his physical body, but a threat to the very spirit of his heart, the place where his dreams got their marching orders.
He was jailed for 60 days. Could he have been more careful? Yes. But could he have been less black and less gay? No. And he wouldn't have wanted to.
Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah.
Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. Glory, hallelujah. Detractors, both black and white, came after Bayard Rustin, armed with the fear-tipped spear of homophobia. Lies that Martin Luther King Jr. and Bayard Rustin were lovers were maliciously concocted by Representative Adam Clayton Powell Jr. for his own political gain.
When Dr. King and Rustin planned a march outside the DNC in Los Angeles, Powell warned King that if he didn't distance himself from Rustin, he would go to the press with a lie that Martin and Bayard were lovers.
This threat pushed Rustin from the movement that he'd put his life and breath on the line for. With pressure from the movement, Rustin resigned from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization that King and Rustin formed.
For years, he stayed underneath the shadows, forced to hide for the first time in his life. The most brilliant strategic mind of the civil rights movement, pushed out of the very movement he helped create.
He was a gay man, unapologetically, and he was shunned and silenced for his loving.
My brother the other day, and I gave him my right hand. As soon as ever my back was turned, he scandalized my name. Do you call that a brother? Do you call that a brother? Do you call that a brother? He scandalized my name.
I met my sister the other day, and I gave her my right hand. As soon as ever my back was turned, she scandalized my name. Do you call that a sister? Do you call that a sister? Do you call that a sister?
She scandalized my name. I met with Martin the other day, and I gave him my right hand. As soon as ever my back was turned,
He shot me, he tried me, he took my word and do you call that a preacher? Do you call that a preacher? Do you call that a preacher?
When they lied on him, he just streamed harder. They caught him in a loving, but they could not take his love. Beautiful boy, sing your beautiful song. What can break you if you leave your truth, your song? August 28th, 1963.
August 28, 1963.
It was time.
Some would say
It was past time.
The 1963 March on Washington came with the momentum of black, brown, yellow, red, and white folks, both standing up and sitting down across the nation.
From the Montgomery bus boycott to sit-ins.
Demonstrations at lunch counters, shopping centers, and onto the freedom rides.
The growing thunder of a marginalized and oppressed citizenry had come together at a mass demonstration in Washington, D.C., the seat of this nation's political power. And if change was going to come,
people would have to come together as
one voice. But they needed an organizer,
an angelic troublemaker,
a visionary,
and there was no one else
that could do what Bayard did. Leaders in the movement knew it and eventually agreed that Bayard Rustin should be brought back as lead organizer.
And organize he did in 8 weeks.
The busiest 8 weeks of Bayard Rustin's life.
It is estimated that 250,000 people showed up to the March on Washington, vastly exceeding expectations, extensively, dramatically, and most importantly, peacefully. How did they do that?
It was Bayard. Bayard's brilliant political and organizational strategy. Bayard's hyperactive, non-stop personality. It was Bayard.
With Julia's voice in his head and in his heart. In 8 weeks.
Without a cell phone or email,
Bayard built an organization out of nothing. He built an alliance of leaders from 27 cities,
2,000 buses,
30 freedom trains,
21 chartered airlines, and 10 chartered trains.
uncounted cars.
One man roller skated 700 miles to get there.
And by 8 a.m. on the day of the march, police reported that 100 buses per hour were streaming through the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel.
And people were scared. They didn't know if they'd be messed with bomb threats or police beatings. But Bayard organized 4,000 volunteer peace marshals from New York City, and everyone had a place to sleep and food to eat and dignity.
Because Bayard organized more than 400 volunteer organizations to pack bagged lunches for bus riders and travelers.
One New York church packed 80,000 cheese sandwiches for hungry marchers. Hand in hand, a 1 mile march, a quarter of a million Americans marching
against the stifling oppression of Jim Crow, economic incarceration, and fear.
A quarter of a million Americans marching, fighting, standing to raise the flag for an America that they believed could have the face of freedom that looked like each one of us.
They came because they wanted a new story. They had a dream, and
it was time. We shall not be moved.
We shall not be moved,
Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Oh no. We shall not be moved.
we shall not.
Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Oh, we're black and white. We shall not be moved. Oh no, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Hand in hand we're singing. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Until we see justice, we shall not be moved. We're fighting against injustice. Hey, we shall not be moved. Like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Until we see this, we'll march. We shall not be moved. Oh yeah. Until we see this, we'll march. Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Oh, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be
And Bayard marched. With his eyes taking in the entire Washington Mall, he could see the fruit of his hard work, freedom harvest to all. They tried to stop him. They tried to press him back. But the power of love is its own righteous path.
The arc of the moral universe is so long. It takes the flight of angelic troublemakers to push it along.
When you face opposition, don't you bend, don't you kneel. Just stick to the place to be the stick in the wheel.
March on, step by step together. March on, advancing every day. It's a movement, not a moment. One human family. When black lives truly matter, we will all be free.
1 month after the March on Washington, 4 girls gathered in the basement of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. They were changing into their choir robes when 15 sticks of dynamite planted by the Ku Klux Klan exploded, ending their young lives.
Had they lived to hear it, on that day they would have heard a Sunday sermon entitled, "A Love That Forgives." To be afraid is to behave like the truth weren't true. Fighting unjust laws, bombs, and hatred, your only weapon is you.
From Birmingham to Selma, some gave all and then gave more. What is your dream? What do you stand Bayard lived the truth that Black lives matter. Some people don't need to be told, others do.
In 2012, Black Lives Matter was created by 3 queer black women as a call to action for black people after George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin.
Black Lives Matters affirms the lives of black queer and trans folks, black undocumented folks, disabled folks, folks with records, and all black lives along the gender spectrum.
Black boys die.
Nobody sings their song.
Black boys die.
Black girls disappear.
They go missing every day.
Black girls disappear.
No one even says their name.
Bayard stood for justice throughout his life, expanding his focus to international causes, promoting free elections in Central America and Africa, supporting refugees, protesting for LGBT rights, and bringing the AIDS crisis to the attention of the NAACP.
Bayard was always exactly who he was,
Julia's grandson,
a
proud
descendant
descendant
of enslaved people and a loving gay child of God.
He lived this way, and he loved this way, and he moved the days this way.
In each one of his 75 years, he stood with the light of truth running a river through the house of his soul.
Bayard Rustin died in 1987. 2 months before the March on Washington for LGBTQ rights.
In our home. With determination, difference is our goal.
Love and peace, justice and truth, marching with our families, our elders, our youth.
Building a better community. Diversity is strength. There is power in our unity.
Color, gender, ethnicity. We respect them all as sanity is part of humanity.
Sister, a brother, a personhood, watching our feet up the street in the neighborhood, moving and step, showing support for the common good.
Come, feel our vitality. Come be a witness. Join in our universality. Make your mission the human condition. You see, when our people stand together, we'll all know equality. Hey!